If you don't know what success means for you, that's okay. Like, it's okay to be in in-between phases. I realized that what I did was use what I have. So if you don't have passion, what do you have inside of you? Do you have a curiosity? Do you have pain? Do you have something of the nature that can propel you or fuel you to try something?
Hey, y'all, what's going on? Perry Jeffries here with another episode of Cash Flow Unlocked. I'm super happy to have this next guest on. I want to introduce Matt LeBris. And I'm going to read his bio here. And I love his bio. And I was sharing with him earlier. We have a whole lot in common. So let me just read here what we have. A kid from Queens. I already love it because I'm a kid from Akron. So we got a kid from Queens. Before Matt LeBris became an award-winning entrepreneur, nationally coveted speaker, and a top-ranked podcast host, to name a few, he had plenty of hurdles to overcome. From losing his dream of playing professional sports at 17 years old after a devastating injury on the baseball diamond, failing out of college, feeling lost, being kicked out of not one but two high schools, Matt's journey is the perfect example of how anybody can overcome the challenge life throws our way and achieve their own personal definition of success. Fast forward today, Matt is a beacon of light through his work, which has positively impacted many lives throughout the globe as he is in pursuit of his North Star goal, impacting 1 billion lives. Today, Matt serves as the founder of 1B Branding, a NYC-based branding agency, host of a top-ranked podcast, Decoding Success, and nationally coveted public speaker and a philanthropist within the New York collegiate entrepreneur ecosystem and beyond. With that being said, y'all, man, let's introduce one of my friends here, Matt LeBris. Let's start off with just a kickoff question, and then we're going to get into your background and how you got here and all of that. So the first question I have for you here, thinking with the end in mind, if money were infinite, you had no concerns of running out of money, all bills are paid, you can do what you want to do, how would you spend your day, your week, your month, and your year? What would you be doing if money were not an issue for you?
If money was not an issue, we would be doing exactly this. We would be doing exactly this. And if it wasn't an issue and you hit me up and you said, yo, Matt, I want you on the show, I would have said, you know what, Perry, let me know when. I'm booking you a flight. You're coming to my studio in New York City. You know, like that's the goal, man. And that's what I strive for every single day. I absolutely love connecting with individuals just like yourself. I love chopping it up, love learning. I'm a sponge, man. I'm a sponge. So, and I like to be squeezed so that I can give it back to other people as well. We would be doing exactly this, to say the least.
I love it, man. I love it. So I think that's a great way to kind of dive into it. So we met each other. This had to be a couple years now. I applied and became a ambassador when Damon John, big shout out to Damon, when Damon wrote out his book, Rise and Grind. And you were running point on a lot of that initiative. And that's how we got connected. So that's how we got connected, man. And since then, what have you been doing? So that's where we first met each other. What have you been doing since then?
Yeah, and I'm very grateful you were a part of what we were doing there. I absolutely admire everyone that had helped out because it was a total team effort in regard to being able to have the success that we had with that book. In fact, I actually have it right up here on the wall, just, a lot of achievements with that. And it was really a team effort. So I want to say thank you for being a part of that. And ultimately, I'm going to say this, man, that opportunity really shaped what I saw, what was possible for me, right? You mentioned in the bio the devastating injury, which really, kind of threw me for a loop, feeling very lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. But while I was working with Damon and kind of getting thrown in the fire and doing something I've never done before in regards to content in numerous different forms, I realized like, hey, what I was doing with Damon, let me try it for myself. And ultimately that had birthed the idea of being able to speak publicly. That had birthed the idea of being able to have my own podcast. It had birthed the idea of having my own business. So I say all of that because that's exactly what I've been doing over the past few years, specifically with a lot of emphasis on the podcast, as mentioned earlier. Like that is the dream, that is the dream. And it's funny how we get led to things in life because, as mentioned, I felt passionless for years. I was successful at work. I was successful in my career, but I just felt passionless. And oftentimes we can get caught up feeling like society tells us you need to follow your passion, follow your passion. But if you don't know what your passion is, how do you know what to follow?
Ooh.
And one thing I said to myself, and I didn't notice this in the moment, but one thing I said to myself was, I'm a high performing individual. I might not have passion right now, but one thing I had was pain. Man, I had a lot of pain, and I'm sure we're diving into that, but I had a lot of pain, and I'm going to use that to fuel me. And that's exactly what helped me get the podcast to where it is today, was just a pain, like a curiosity of how I could alleviate the pain that I was feeling. And ultimately it got us to where we are. So in short, I've been working on the podcast. We got to top 1% in the world. I've been working on the business, 1B Branding, a branding agency. I do a lot of philanthropic initiatives. Like during the pandemic, I raised $15,000 for the frontline workers here in New York City. Supported small business as well, just because I was like, yo, I'm home bored. Like, I got to do something. I was dating a nurse at the time. I saw what she was going through. So I'm trying to have fun in the process, man. That stuff is fun to me.
Man, that's amazing, brother. And there's so many different things I'm going to dive into here. So I have my notes. So the first thing, man, and we're going to chop it up on a lot of this, but you said something I think is going to be wildly impactful for our audience here. You realized what you were doing for Damon, you could go and do for yourself. And that's a kind of my story, how I left corporate America. And it's like, man, I'm making corporate America a ton of money, and I'm getting paid like 1% of what I generate. Actually, less than that. I was getting paid 30% of 1% of what I was generating. Why don't I go do that on my own? Tell me a little bit about what you went through mentally to get to that point to be like, yo, I can go do this. I can launch a podcast. I can be a speaker. I can have impact. Tell me, walk us through kind of what you went through mentally with that whole process, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm very grateful for Damon. I actually sent him an email on Thanksgiving, or a text message, whatever it was. And I was just like, man, like, I want to let you know, like, you're like a father figure to me, because he showed me firsthand what is possible in life. And it's not to downplay my own dad, but like, he showed me what is possible in life. And as I was working on his stuff, I started to work on my own. So for example, I just started writing blogs, like things that were on my mind. I would just sit there behind the keyboard and I would write. And the next thing you know, people are hitting me up to come speak at their college. I'm like, whoa, like, all right, let me double down on this. So then I started recording videos and putting them out on Instagram. I started doing other people's podcasts. And I'm like, wait, like, I could have my own. Like, ultimately what it was just like a key that was already in the door, but it just needed to be turned to be unlocked. Like, Damon put the key in the door for me, and it was up to me, because everyone can't do everything for you. Like, you can get the key in the door, but just me turning it through little action really showed me what's possible by, unlocking it. And I'm still unlocking it, man. That's still a work in progress. But yeah, man, it was just him really showing me mentally what was possible.
Man, that's so powerful, man. I can think back to so many different times where I had people who, I watched from afar, you included. And it's like, man, he is killing it. And I remember when the transition took place, and I'm like, man, he's killing it. And to your point, just being able to have somebody to show you how to do it is so key. I'm always talking about the power of mentorship and coaches and things of that nature, man. So it's just wonderful to hear that story from that perspective. And that analogy, bro, that, saying that key and unlocking that door. Yep. I'm going to steal that, because that's powerful. Because guess what? We on cash flow unlock, right? So the unlock that key of your potential. Woohoo, unlock that door of the potential with the key. And, somebody can put the key in, but you got to turn it with small actions. Brother, that's in my mind for forever. So appreciate that, Jim. So then let's transition to this piece, bro, because you mentioned this, the passionless. Right. So not having passion. So you're a former athlete, we share that in common. Right. And I'm going to get into kind of that pain and the loss and things of that nature. But I want to first touch base on this passionless, because we see a lot of that, man, just people just kind of just floating around and not having passion. Walk us through, man, that process of when you were like, yo, this is what I'm like. How did you find out what you were passionate about?
Yeah, I think it's the same way that we find out what it is we like in regards to like food. Like, you have to taste different things. Like, you don't know if you like chicken parmesan unless you have chicken parmesan. You don't know if you like oxtail unless you have oxtail. Like, you got to try things. But I think for me, it was years upon years where I just felt like I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, everyone, and let me paint the picture. Like, we were in a society, and maybe we're still in this society, this culture that paints passion to be like, the thing that you need to go after in life. And I'm like, all right, well, if you don't have it, what do you go after in life?
Word.
You know, culture is pushing that agenda, but I don't think what's pushed enough is what you do when you don't feel passion. And I think what I did, and again, I didn't know this in the moment, but like if you're listening to this right now and you feel like you don't have a passion for something, just know that that's okay, right? Just like I say this on my show all the time, if you don't know what success means for you, that's okay. Like, I think it's important to emphasize that it's okay to be in between phases. Like you don't need to jump from one block to the other block. Like you could be in between the blocks every now and then. Like that's okay. And I realized that what I did was use what I have. So if you don't have passion, what do you have inside of you? Do you have a curiosity? Do you have pain? Do you have something of the nature that can propel you or fuel you to try something? Right. And it's not to go into like, I went into this podcast, man, when I look back, man, I say to myself, wow, that was so bad. You know, the first few episodes, the first year, the second year, I was like, man, like who the hell was I? But that's who I was at that point in life. Like it's not to be perfect. It's to just try. And in the process of trying, you're going to strike gold. Eventually, you're going to strike gold. It might not happen with the first thing you try. It might not happen with the second. Like I was writing blogs. I love to write, but I'm like, you know what? I don't do that anymore. You know, I was doing other things and I don't do those things anymore, but the podcast I'm still doing because it's my passion. And we got to try things, man. We got to be curious.
That's hella powerful, man, because sometimes we get locked into, hey, this is what we've always done, or this is what I do, and not trying anything new. Like the fact that we're recording an episode right now on my podcast is mind blowing to me, because I dial in and listen to your podcast. And big shout out to Coding Success. You know what I'm saying? We're going to get to that here in a little bit, how you really been moving the needle with that. But it's just crazy when you think about that whole process and getting exposed to different things. No way me as a 20-year financial advisor would I be thinking I'm doing a podcast episode now, or even doing what I'm doing now in the financial space.
Right.
So,
Right.
But you brought up something, man, and I want to make sure we address it, because I feel like we probably shared. We talked about this pain, right? And you referenced it now about at least 2 times in our conversation. We all go through some pain. We all go through some loss. And, you know, the people who, you know, can take that and turn it into something positive, from what I've seen, just from my almost 47 years in life, the people who can take that and turn that into something positive as motivation and whatnot are the ones who are really winning. But I don't know, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth. Let's talk about kind of the pain that you've experienced and what you've been able to do with that. And
yeah, I absolutely. And I want to hear from you on this too. I'm always curious on this specific topic. I think for years there was a numbness to it. A lot happened, you know, through very young ages or age brackets where truthfully I didn't necessarily realize like what was even taking place. But for me, what had happened was I was just going from milestone to milestone to milestone, or experience from experience to experience, whether it be getting arrested or getting kicked out of high school twice, or failing out of college, or you would love this one, investing in my ego and blowing a shit ton of my life savings.
No
you know,
doubt.
that's a bad investment, by the way. But ultimately, all of those experiences, while I was numb to them as they were happening and nothing was being processed about them, essentially that led to it being blown up in my face at a certain point. And having those things blown up in my face, that was kind of like the moment where I said to myself, you know what, like the check engine light has been on. Like you've seen the check engine light on the dashboard on for a really long time. We need to make sure that we're tending to the engine now, the engine being the mind, the engine being the heart, the engine being the soul. And for years, man, I didn't realize what I was doing, but ultimately, and I don't want anyone else to experience it that way, man. I think it blew up in my face. Like the car stopped running. the car stopped running. And this actually happened in what I would say is probably 2020. And it took some time for me to get the wheels back on the car, for, to put some fresh oil in that car for it to be able to run. It took some years. I don't want anyone to have to experience the blow up of emotions or whatever the case is that I went through. But I'm curious, when it comes to pain for you, if you don't mind me asking this, just for the sake of conversation, what did that look like for you? Because like, I'm saying that I don't want anyone to experience what I experienced, but also like, I would love to know your perspective on that.
Yeah, man. So, man, first of all, thank you for asking that question. There's been several moments in my life, and as I was listening to your story, I'm going to address the pain of losing everything, not once, but twice. So it was, let's go back to 2007, 2009. By this time, I've already been a financial advisor with actually the largest wealth management firm in the world at the time, a Swiss bank. Started there in 2003. Had got into real estate around 2001 and had accumulated about a $4 million real estate portfolio. Well, it was like the wild, wild west back then. Getting financing was super easy. You didn't even have to prove your income. You could just sit and be like, hey, I make $20,000. So they $20,000 a month. So no doc loans, money was super easy. And we saw how that blew the market up in 2007 and 2009. So because I was so highly leveraged, man, that real estate empire started crumbling very, very quickly. I remember one deal where I was in it at about 300,000 because it was appraising originally at 500,000. And by the time we were time to refinance out of the hard money loan, which was around 10, 11%, the value had dropped down to like 200,000. So I was going to have to bring $100,000 cash to the table to even refinance. I had to give it back to the bank and say, hey, here's the keys. I can't do anything with it. Right. So I lost everything in 2007, 2009, right? Lost my credit, lost my cash, embarrassed as hell. I'm riding around in a Jaguar. That shit got repossessed. And and to put the cherry on top, found out I was going to be a dad to not one, but two little humans who were born in 2009. So my twin daughters were born during the Great Recession, where dad had lost his complete ass and was trying to figure out how to hold it all together. Right. I went through that, man, and going through that process, that pain of losing everything, the embarrassment. I'm supposed to be this big time financial advisor, car getting repossessed. It's just going through that whole piece, coming home and the lights being off at the home and my kids sitting in the dark, at 3-4 months old. I never wanted somebody else to experience that type of pain, that type of anxiety, that type of stress. I remember sitting at the end of the street, man, you chain smoking Black and Miles. I wasn't even freaking them. I was just throwing Black and Miles, to the head, just with the anxiety, like how am I going to take care of this family? Right. Then it went into a custody battle, just all of that type jazz, man. So how I moved into this fractional CFO space was I saw what happened to me because I didn't have certain systems in place. And I never want another entrepreneur who's trying to provide for their family to experience that type of pain, because nobody wants to go through that shit, right? And that's what fuels me now, man, and kind of what fueled the podcast and kind of what we're doing now in the community. So that's kind of my pain story, bro.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And, it's just a reminder, even to myself, like, no matter what happens, like, you can start fresh. Like, you can start fresh. And that's something I had to learn for a long time, even when it came to money. Like, when I realized there were numerous years where I just found myself investing in my ego to ensure that I was maintaining a certain image when things were shifting in my life. And I carry some sort of guilt and some sort of shame, even to this day, about the way that I was operating at that point. But like, when I hear your story, it's like, you can start fresh. Like, what's happened in the past, you can't change that. No matter how much you try to change that, you can't change that. But what you can change is your future, what's to come right here in that present moment. And that's a great reminder, man. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. And it's wild too, because, I'm very forthcoming with that. I shared a lot on different platforms and things of that nature. And it's one of those what makes me really good at what I do when helping clients, because I'm not this, high and almighty. I never made a financial mistake and I've just created wealth, on top of wealth, on top of wealth. Nah, I'd have made some horrible mistakes. You know what I'm saying? That invested in the ego and buying I had a all white Jag, all white Navigator.
What kind of Jaguar?
Oh man, I had the S-type, baby. You know what I'm saying? With the bubble eyes. You know what I'm saying? Peanut butter guts. Oh yeah, it was wild. And I tell my clients, it's like, you actually want an advisor. You actually want a coach, a mentor who's taking some L's. Because if they haven't taken any L's, they really can't help you not take an L.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. It's that's a great point. Like, and the best part is, like, I'm getting the chills just saying this, like, you're able to learn from the mistakes of that advisor, of that mentor, of that guide, and avoid them yourself, man. Like, just think about how much saving you can do, not even just monetarily, but in other areas of life, man. Like, you could save yourself heartbreak in other areas. You could save yourself time, like time we're never even getting back, everything else we can get back. But man, there's so much to be saved, without a doubt.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. So let's go into, because I know kind of a pain that we share is, our athletic careers, right?
Yeah.
So you're playing baseball. Tell us what happened. What's going on?
Yeah, man. In high school, I played baseball and basketball. Baseball was my real sport, but the basketball program was nationally ranked. I went to a school called Christ the King. They produced Lamar Odom.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Lamar Odom. We just had Carmelo Anthony's son. He ended up transferring, which is a whole other story, but we don't need to get into that. But some real ballers. Jose Alvarado, who's on the Pelicans, just went there. He had his jersey retired. We were just with the Pelicans the other night. And baseball was my jam, but I'm 6'5". I could shoot the hell out of the ball. So I was on the basketball team too. With all of that being said, my senior year had come, and I just realized, like, I was experiencing shoulder pain constantly while on the pitcher's mound. And there was one specific day, our coach was a former New York Yankee World Series champion, a gentleman named Alan Watson. And he was a pitcher himself, and he just kept telling me to throw the ball when I was on the mound, and I was kind of working through this discomfort. And I remember this so vividly. A kid that I was growing up with, we were in the process of playing like an interleague game where we were playing our own team, inter-squad, whatever we called it, right? Mm-hmm. So, half of us were on the field, half of us were in the dugout, and this gentleman named Josh was in the batter's box. I grew up with Josh, hell of a ball player, and he had 2 strikes on him. I went to go throw one last pitch, and he just like whiffed at it. And he goes, man, that was one hell of a changeup. And I looked at him and I was like, dude, that wasn't a changeup. That was my fastball. And I was throwing like 83 to 85 miles an hour at 17 years old. And maybe a little bit less than that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was above 80. Yeah. And I realized in that moment that my arm was dead. Like, that was my last pitch. Wow. So I tried throwing the ball again. I couldn't even lift my arm above my shoulder. Yep. And I was like, oh man. So my coach was like, all right, go play second base. I go play second base. What happens? Next batter, ground ball right to me. I field the ball cleanly. Couldn't lift my arm. He was like looking at me like, are you going to throw the ball? I couldn't even do this. Oh. So that was it. I iced my shoulder, went to a doctor. He said that rehab would have been able to help me, but down the line, it's a good chance that I would have needed surgery, especially if I was still a pitcher, which is what I was planning to do. Yeah. All of that said, I lost every scholarship, every eye that I had on me. And to be honest, I said this to you earlier, like, I just, if I do have any regrets, it's that after the surgery, I didn't give it my all. Mm-hmm. Like, after the surgery, I just started to do other things. And granted, it led me to where I am 100%. I started to get into business at 17 years old, specifically in hospitality here in New York City. But man, it's just like, I love the sport, man. I love basketball too, but I love baseball, specifically pitching. Like, I think it's such an art form. To be able to control the game, it's in your hands. Every single pitch, the game is in your hands, just like on the court. If you're a point guard, like, every single time you're dribbling up and down that court, the game is in your hands. Like, it's so beautiful when you're able to view it like that. But man, there was a lot of pain that, was numb because the game was gone from my life outside of being a spectator and going to, professional games and high school games and college games and whatnot.
Yeah, man. So what would be, and I'm right there with you, man, because I shared with you a little bit about my story playing basketball. And, there's so much we can control, some we can't control, right? And I know I wouldn't be in the space I'm in, being able to help the people that I help had that career move forward. It'd probably been a little different, right? But
Yeah.
what are you telling the person out there? So whether it's, baseball, basketball, whatever the case may be, what they had planned to do is, taken away from them. You know what I'm saying? The rug is snatched underneath them. How, and I'd love to go back and forth with you on this one. What are you telling that person? It's like, hey, what you thought was going to happen is not happening. How do you then take that man and move forward? Because obviously you have, but I want to dig a little bit into that because I think that's really important for us from a mindset shift standpoint to really know that all of us have taken some L's, all of us have taken some L's, or all of us will take some L's. What do we need to do to move forward from that?
Absolutely. There's more L's to come in my life. I know that for sure.
No doubt.
I think it comes down to an equation that I was taught. And by the way, I suck at math, so there's no numbers involved. But it's an equation. A gentleman named John Gordon. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's an author. He's really, really incredible. In fact, he does a lot of speaking at colleges and universities with major sport programs, even professional sport programs. And John had mentioned an equation, which is E plus P equals O. And I said, all right, well, when letters started to get involved in math, I got even worse, man. So you got to tell me what this means. But essentially it stands for events plus perspective equals the outcome.
Ooh,
and we don't get to control every event that takes place in our life. And I mean, I could raise my hand and be the guy that says, well, I sure as hell try to control everything that happens in my life, but we just simply can't, right? Like we just can't. We negotiate with life all the time. We try to manipulate life in our favor all the time. But the truth of the matter is we just can't control that. What we can control 100% of the time is our perspective. So I'll give an example. This is oftentimes the example I use when I talk about this. If you're going through heartbreak right now, it's not easy to be the happy-go-lucky person and say, you know what, that relationship didn't work out, but the next one will. It's not easy to look at the relationship you're in right now or exiting because of heartbreak or whatever the case is and be like, well, I learned this, and this, and this from this relationship, right? It's hard to have the perspective in the moment, but I need you to think 3 months, 6 months, 6 years, 60 years down the line. What did you learn from that event? And what you learn from that event, that perspective, is what's truly going to determine that outcome. So that's what I would share. And man, I think looking back, the perspective of me in that particular instance, man, I wasn't taking care of my body. I never wanted to ice my shoulder when I got home after pitching a game. I wanted to play video games, hop in the shower, play video games right away. I wanted to be with my friends. I wanted to do stuff like that. I never took care of my body. There was an emphasis. My dad would always say it, but I was like, Dad, what do you know, man? I'm just going to go do what I want to do. I know everything, So, man, there's so much that I learned from that, but that's what I would share. And it doesn't even have to do with sports, right? Just any event, no man. Doubt. Our perspective determines that outcome.
Man, that's so powerful, man, because it just really confirming and affirming, a process I'm going through right now. So I'm going through a program called the Bulletproof Entrepreneur. Big shout out to my guy, John Whiting. Been rocking with John for some time. And his program is around the shift in perspective, right? And I'll share this with you. I thought it's just really cool. It's kind of like hot and cold. So, I'm here in Columbus, Ohio right now. And if it's, 50 degrees in March, that's a pretty decent day, right? You can go out running, you can go out shooting the whole nine, right? Now, 50 degrees down in Mexico or Jamaica is cold. We not going outside, right? Right. But then also too, I may say 30 degrees, 20 degrees are ooh, okay, it's cold, it's freezing, right? But if we take that 20, 30 degrees to Minnesota or to a North Pole, it's man, this is a blazing day. So is it really a hot and cold? No, it's just temperature. And it's all about perspective because, what we may think is hot at 110 degrees, oh man, it is burning up. Well, on the sun, where the temperature is whatever 1,000 degrees, that's a cold day, and we think it's burning up. And so it's so much. The one thing we can't control is our perspective, right? And Absolutely. Looking at it and understanding that, hey, what is the lesson I can glean from this? So this is super powerful, man. I actually love this. I'm glad you shared that. So super
No,
dope.
I appreciate that temperature perspective right there, right? Because I could resonate with that. Plus, it's 50 degrees here in New York City too. So like I was saying, it's a nice day. I said that earlier, so I very
No
much
doubt.
so resonate with that.
No doubt, man. No doubt. So let's jump into the Well, actually, before we get into the podcast, you said something here and you used a number that, I don't see a lot of people use this number. I have one person that I know personally, who uses this number. And we were on a phone call one day and just catching up. We went to, we started off at Howard together as freshmen. And since then, he's just created a huge real estate empire out that way. And we were having this conversation, and it's like, I asked him, I said, hey, bro, so man, what's the end goal? What are we trying to get accomplished here in the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years? He's like, yeah, I want to be worth $1 billion. And it kind of knocked me down. I was like, wow, did you say $1 billion with a B? And to see his trajectory, it's like, okay, you're not too far off from that, right? And you mentioned in your bio that you wanted to impact, I think it was impact 1 billion lives, bro. Like there's some to that effect. So I don't want to misquote you here, but it was some to that effect. Yeah, said your North Star is to impact 1 billion lives. Man, walk us through, first of all, using that big number. And it's because that's what I'm learning is it has always been a challenge for me, is not thinking big enough. Right. And it used to say how I'm going to impact 1,000 lives or 100,000 or 1 million, but 1 billion. Man, walk me through, man, how you even got to that big number, and then how you want to go about impacting these billion lives, bro.
Absolutely. It happened in 2018. I was at a Tony Robbins event in New Jersey, and man, I saw so much of myself and so much of what I wanted to become in him. And even just the way he was on stage, man, like he was using foul language. And I mean, that's the way I talk, So I'm like, man, like I could see me in this guy. Like it was crazy. Yeah. Go through the whole weekend. And I said to myself, I think I wrote it down. I actually have the workbook literally right next to me at my desk. And I think I wrote down in that workbook that I wanted to impact 1 billion people. Now, when I say 1 billion, obviously that's literally 1/8 of the world. There's about 8 billion people on the planet. And, I don't know if that number's increased or decreased with everything that goes on in this world. That's another story. But ultimately, that's a lot of people. Yeah. So I said to myself, how does one person do that? And then I really thought about it and I broke it down. Like, I personally probably can't impact 1 billion people. But here's the thing. There's someone today that's listening to this podcast that learned something from either you or I that can then take that and bring it to their people. That person can teach that person. And it's just like a compound effect. So at the end of the day, the goal is essentially immeasurable. Like it can't actually be measured where I have like a tally and I'm like, you know what? Sally was impacted today or John was impacted today. I can't actually do that. But what I can do is approach life every single day with the desire to impact one person. And that one person can then impact another person. That person can impact, it's a compound effect, man. And that's what I strive for every day. Like, I just want to know, even if I just hold the door open. Yesterday, I was walking down the street and I saw a gentleman who had a walker, and I literally ran to the door to make sure that I was able to open the door for him. To me, that's impact, right? Yeah. Impact to me is love. And I think that's what we need more of in this world is love. And I think we don't have love because we don't love ourselves enough. And man, like I the way I operate is I say to myself, if I was that gentleman walking out of that door with that walker and I saw him struggling, like, yeah, he got the door open, but like he was like banging the walker up against the door. I'm like, you know what? If I was that guy, I would want someone to open this door for me. Word. To me, that's impact. Every day I need to do something like that. That's the way I operate.
Man, bro, that is so. I'm over here losing my shit because I'm like, this brother speaking my language. Like I'm gonna have to get up there and see you in the city, man, next time we up there, and we might need to do like a DNA test because we might be related someplace else. You know what I'm saying? But this is so fire. But I just want to make sure and just kind of repeat what you said, but just for the audience, so y'all don't miss this piece. What I have here with my notes: impact is love, and when we think about impacting people, it doesn't have to be, oh, I gave them a 50-minute talk, or I gave them this presentation, or impact can just be the act of showing love, just showing compassion for your fellow human being. So that's my first piece in there. So, right, impact is love. And then if you can impact one person a day, I had this conversation with my daughters all the time about that 1% rule. You don't have to go from being okay to great today. Focus on getting 1% better, because that 1% better is going to compound over time and you're going to be able to reach your goals, right? And probably surpass your goals, to be quite honest with you, in that whole piece. So I love this compound effect, because it's not, hey, are you and I going to actually talk to a billion people? But who are we going to talk to who's then going to share that and then share that and share that, which goes right into, kind of our vision with Cash Flow Unlocked. So I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, bro, is our vision is to close the wealth gap. And we've changed this a couple of times. So it used to be close the wealth gap one business at a time, where everybody don't have a business. We don't want to, exclude anybody. Then it was close the wealth gap one relationship at a time, because it's about relationships. And Here recently, I've been leaning more towards closing the wealth gap one mindset at a time, because what we've learned through some books that we've read is that wealth, to tie back to what you said here, wealth should be portable, should be transportable. And folks be like, what do you mean transportable? You talking about like a trust? Or no. Understanding how to create wealth and how to multiply and live a life of abundance, and not necessarily talking about monetarily, but with your time and your relationships and all of that, is something that you should be able to take wherever you go. Doesn't matter if you're in New York City, Columbus, Ohio, out in LA, Jamaica, South America, whatever the case may be, right? It's portable. And that's what we teach the next generation. So when I hear people say, hey, I want to, create generational wealth, now, understanding it's not about having a certain insurance product or it's a stock idea, or no, you have to teach how to create wealth and how you should define it, not necessarily being in dollars and cents, but how to, take what you're passionate about, right? Going back to the passion piece, or even finding out what you're passionate about, but really just having impact. If we can focus on understanding that wealth really is just having impact and helping people be their best selves monetarily with their time, their relationships, well, then we're creating a wealthy society. Anyway, man, I had to get that off real quick, brother, because
I agree.
You had me flowing over here. I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely.
I agree with all of that. And you know what? You sharing that made me realize something too. Like oftentimes I say that I want to impact someone positively. So I think of a positive thing, but on the flip side of it, I was just thinking, I'm like, you know what? A positive impact could be us right now sharing something and it not resonating with someone. And that's okay. Because now, being that they know it doesn't resonate with them, they don't have to do whatever it may be, right? That's us really guiding them to get to where they do need to be. So like you actually just unlocked another portal in the mind of how impact actually works, man. It's wow. Mind blowing.
Yeah, no doubt. You know what I'm saying? So I know you said earlier, math wasn't your jam, but man, your math is on point, brother. You know what I mean? So you don't have to be a calculus major, because this funny thing is that was my degree. My degree is in math with a minor in biology, right? So I have all of this high level math, and it all comes down to percentages, understanding compounding interest, right? And just the basic things. So this is absolutely crazy, bro. Love this conversation. So man, tell us what's going on. Tell us the direction of the podcast. Tell us what some things that you're working on here, because we've talked about, growing up and past experiences and things of that nature. What's next for Matt? What's on the horizon?
Yeah, man. Right now we're in a process of moving the podcast in studio, and that is something that I am very nervous about, in full transparency. Yeah. Right. I'm nervous, and I think when you find yourself in moments of being nervous, the old Matt, the younger Matt would have, jumped in that water, like not even looking back, like just doing it. I don't operate like that anymore, man. It goes back to, what you teach your young ones, like just 1%, like do something that gets you closer to that 1% each day. And that's what I'm doing. So little by little, I'm doing episodes in studio, as opposed to like, all right, everyone come to the studio. It's like, no, this one will be in studio. this one will be in studio, like operating like that. But ultimately what's going on is just really continuing to learn through the process of helping others decode what success is for them. And that process, what I realize, it's not even just about how you define success today or how you defined it years ago, but the most important stuff is the gap. Like, what happened in the gap? What happened during those years? And ultimately, all of it always seems to tie into what happened to us in our childhood. Like, what were the beliefs that were instilled in us? What was the programming, the conditioning, the culture, the society, the parenting, all of that? And man, these conversations get deep. So I learn a shit ton while I'm, guiding the ship on that front. Man, I'm a student on that front too, and that's really what's going down, man. It's the process of evolving the show, bringing it to the next level, but bringing myself to the next level too. Because if I don't go to the next level, the show can't go to the next level. So I'm just trying to hit it 1% every day, like we said.
Man, so many gems in there. So just looking here in my notes, let's start with that last one. You can't go to the next. You have to go to the next level in order to take whatever your situation is to the next level, right? To be you want to be a great parent, self-development and grow yourself, right? John Maxwell, I'm one of his one of their coaches, and it always drills down to everything rises and falls with leadership. Your finances in order. It's not necessarily you need you need to find a great mutual fund or a stock idea. You need to develop and grow as a person, right? Your relationship not where you want it to be, develop and grow as a person. So, just understanding that as you grow, everything kind of grows with you there, right? So I love that whole piece. You touched on something, man, that I didn't even realize, bro. I didn't even realize. I've been in my industry 20 years. This is my 20-year anniversary being, a financial advisor, planner, whatever you want to call it. And it didn't hit me until here recently. And you just brought it up, your belief system and what has been instilled with you and kind of going back to your childhood. We recently did a training on what we call the money story. And as I sit back, man, I'm like, sometimes I would get frustrated, like, why are people functioning with this broke mindset? And why are people executing this basic strategy, to create wealth? Because creating wealth in my world is not a hard process. It's don't overspend, save and invest. It's pretty much that. Don't go into a whole lot of debt. Don't spend more than you have some savings for emergency and invest. And whatever you invest in, whether you're investing in your business, real estate, stock, doesn't matter. But I regress there. So my point is, what I came to I had this moment of clarity, if you will. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Jay-Z on that. Had this moment of clarity. It was like, it's the money story. We all have a financial intelligence DNA that we have inherited from our parents and grandparents on how we view money and view success. And none of us, I won't say none of us, but very few of us take the time to unpack that. Why do I put stuff on credit cards so quickly? Because that's how my mom worked. Okay. Why do I believe in having 5 different hustles and spreading myself too thin? Because that's something my dad would say. Hey, you need to have you an A, B, C, and D hustle, right? And then spreading yourself too thin, now that not being a master of your one thing is probably stopping you from accumulating, more capital to create more wealth, right? So I started diving into this, man, and I did a training on it where I literally had folks contact me and said, man, Perry, I had to get off the call because it brought me to an emotional state because I had no idea that I had this this DNA, this money story that I inherited from my parents and had no idea why I couldn't move forward. So you were spot on with that one. And I remember being on one of your episodes, I think you mentioned something to that whole to that effect of unpacking your childhood, getting therapy, things of that nature. I remember listening to one of your episodes talking about that, man. So let's talk about that real quick, man. We've been rolling almost 40 minutes now, man. And I'm like, I know I'm gonna have to close this bad boy out here soon, but I'm just enjoying the conversation so much. I'm just gonna probably just blow your cell phone up. But but talk to a little bit, man, because you brought it up, that gap and unpacking what we've inherited and from our childhood, man. What would you tell the audience with that? I think let's end on that. Let's kind of dive into that a little bit, but let's talk about unlocking that, because so much of this is coming from what our childhood looks like and things of that nature.
For sure.
What would you say? What would you say to the audience, bro?
Well, first and foremost, I want to give you a book recommendation. I'm sure you potentially have already read this, but this actually, it's all about money. It's The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. Have you read that book?
Yeah. I have.
So that book by T. Harv Eker, he talks all about our money conditioning, right? But it also translates into this question too, like what's our conditioning in general? Like we have to understand this. So I'll use myself as the guinea pig. Growing up, my parents were going through a divorce when I was in like 4th or 5th grade. And when you're young like that, you're a sponge, man. Like you are soaking it all in. Like those are still early developmental years without a doubt. And one thing that I was programmed to believe through neglect, through, verbatim, right? We're conditioned in 3 ways, and I don't know all 3 off the top of my head, so I don't want to botch it. But, what we see, what we hear, and what we experience is essentially the 3. We could sum it up like that. And my experiences led me to believe that my worth was dependent on achievement, that I wasn't worthy of certain things. I was neglected. So, just think about how all of this impacts us. Like we really need to get deep with ourselves and truly understand where these show up in our lives. So a perfect example, one place they're oftentimes revealed is in personal relationships, intimate relationships. So if you're dating someone, whether you're heterosexual, however you rock, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when you let someone in close to you, that's generally when things start to get revealed. That's what happened in my life. And I realized like, wow, okay, your self-esteem, no matter what you accomplish professionally, I still had low self-esteem. Like I was living very egotistically, but once that ego was passed up and people got close to me, my self-esteem was low. So I had to work on that. I'm still working on all of this stuff, man. I'm still a work in progress. I had to work on understanding that I am deserving of certain things. So when it comes to professional stuff, if I was given a certain amount of money, like I might have self-sabotaged because I didn't think I was worth that, right? This type of stuff pops up in so many areas of our life, but it's those in-between years of, I used to define success, not verbally this way, but subconsciously. I would define success by how much money I had, just like, you were talking about earlier, the car I was driving, all of that. Like that's what success was to me until all of it got stripped away. And then I realized, oh shit, like, does that mean I'm not successful anymore? So now where I'm able to define success differently, what transpired in those in-between years was messing up. I would use the word effing up, a lot of that. And on the backside of it, getting closer to how I define success now was the years of actually exploring my own inner depth. So, man, there's so much discovery in that, but it's absolutely necessary. If you are listening to this and you know that you want to be the best version of yourself, that journey inward is necessary. Like I would never sit here and say, you know what, you need therapy. I'm not saying that, man. Like you could do it however you need to do it, but you need to turn inward. You need to peel back the layers. Like I know that, listen, when you peel back the layers of an onion, tears come. Like we can't be scared to cry, man. I cried a hell of a lot of times when I was peeling back the layers, and I still do. I cried yesterday thinking about my dog. Like I'm an emotional guy.
No doubt,
so no doubt. We got to be open to it, man. We got to be open to it. But that is exactly what it is, man. It's just peeling back the layers. We got to get real with ourselves.
Got to get real with yourselves, right? Because this is maybe a financial podcast, if you will, but none of that. We can't even talk about that stuff until we, like say, turn inwards and get deep and unlock. And that's how we unlock the cash flow, man. Man, brother, this has been so fire. I'd love to have you back on here. And like I was telling you earlier, never intended to, start podcasting, kind of just stumbled into it during the pandemic when I was trying to provide some value out there. And so just humbled and honored to have you on here, man. And like I said, I've been listening to your piece for some time now. I think I was doing my what was the deal through for Shello, the top 5 deal, whatever case may be. But anyway, I was going out for my walk, and you were my podcast of choice when I was going out for my 45-minute walk, man.
I appreciate that.
So I've been rocking with you for a minute. So for our audience, who want to connect with you, follow you, and dive in, man, what's the best way to follow you, connect with you? Tell our audience the best way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm probably on social media way more than I should be, to be honest. But most frequently, I find myself on Instagram, kind of just scrolling and doing whatever. But ultimately, the best way to connect is right through there, Instagram. It's just at MATT_LEBRIS at Matt_LeBris. I always answer my DMs. I'm very transparent. I'm very open. There's no one else on my account. Like, I do everything that I need to do by myself, for the sake of building community, for the sake of giving value and whatever the case, impact, right? We talked about impact. That's the best way. And then the podcast is everywhere, man. I mean, Spotify, Apple, Google, all of that good stuff. If you want to check that out, it's out there. But I also want to take a quick second and say thank you to you, Perry, for what you're putting out into the world with this show, with your work. Thank you for being you. Thank you for showing up the way that you do. Thank you for sharing this platform. Like, I just want to express that gratitude. So thank you so much.
Man, likewise, brother, likewise. So hopefully I can get you back on here sometime in the future, talk about some other topics, because I feel like, man, we could probably do a whole piece of, we could probably do a 24-hour marathon just doing a deep dive into stuff, man. So thank you again so much for your time. It's so much appreciated. And for our audience, be sure you share this episode, right? No, this is not your typical financial podcast. This is, we're unpacking, we're unlocking your cash flow by giving you the key but you need to take that step and turn that key to be able to unlock your potential, which eventually is going to unlock your cash flow. Thank you for that gem earlier, brother. I really appreciate that. So with that being said, y'all, share the podcast, and we appreciate y'all. We see you in the next one. Peace.